Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Health Theory. I'm here with Dr. Joel Gould. Thank you so much for joining me, man. I have had so much fun researching you. It has been a wild ride, I think, to say the least. So if you don't mind, give people a little bit of background. Your story is pretty interesting.
Sure. Well, I'm a dentist by profession. I'm Canadian, and I practiced in Canada for about 10 years in Vancouver before moving down to Los Angeles. And I've been here in Manhattan Beach for the last 20 years. My story is kind of interesting because I was sick for most of my life with an autoimmune disease called Crohn's, something that wasn't that common back in those days, but now is much more popular. It's happening a lot around the world. And about 5 years ago, so I've been in my location in Manhattan Beach for about 20 years. About 5 years ago, I discovered by chance that I had sleep apnea. And I was
What do you mean
surprised
by
because,
chance?
well, I was at a conference, and part of the conference, it was in Las Vegas, is they said, listen, there's 30 of you here. We're going to give 5 of you sleep studies to take to your hotel room and bring them back down in the morning. We'll review them. So out of the 5 dentists that were there learning about this whole new syndrome, they said, well, 3 of you have it, 1 of you has it pretty
Whoa,
bad, and that was me. And so that was
that's
sort of
really
by
interesting.
accident. Yeah. Well, I'm not obese now. I was heavier. I didn't
Give me a
snore.
range. What are we talking about when you say heavy?
Well, I've stopped weighing myself at about 250 pounds, and I'm
How
6'3".
tall are you? 6'3"? 250
6'3", yeah.
pounds of 6'3" is not exactly obese.
I was one of those bigger guys, it's one of those things where my whole life I was always trying to be fit. And I graduated from dental school at the age of 24, and I dedicated my life to follow the latest trends in fitness. And no matter what I did, I could not whip my body into shape. And I really tried everything.
Well,
It
so hold
wasn't
on. Are
until,
you still suffering from Crohn's at that point?
oh yeah. Yeah. So
Because
I
I
was
mean that
diagnosed with
that
Crohn's.
is gnarly. In fact, I'm kind of surprised you were able to put on the weight if you had Crohn's. Isn't it usually that people have a harder time like keeping the weight on just because they're not able to hold anything in? I was going to say
Yes. So
down,
some
but unfortunately
down.
that
It
isn't the
is it
problem. Yeah.
unfortunately, yeah. Yeah. So it's very common for it to go in both directions. The issue is that when I was 14, I started taking prednisone.
Hmm.
So that changed the trajectory of my health, and I started putting on weight. I actually began to gain weight in the fifth grade or fourth grade, and it sort of goes along with my story. It's quite common to some of the stuff that happened to me. So a lot of people who have severe Crohn's disease will have a hard time keeping enough food in. I didn't have that issue. It was for me. My Crohn's disease was I never had to have surgery, so it was
I
always
was going to
just mild
ask.
enough. Yeah, I was only hospitalized once, and it was just managing my symptoms. For anyone
At the
who
time, so I had a friend growing up, so this would have been in the 90s, that was diagnosed with Crohn's disease. And I remember that they were just like, you have to live with it. That's it. He had parts of his bowel removed, which was just god awful. I mean, what he went through was so gnarly. I remember they put him on prednisone as well, and his face ballooned up. It was crazy. He was
yeah.
unrecognizable. And he struggled with that for a long time. So was it just you had a milder case, or were you doing something right that mitigated some of the symptoms?
Not really. I took different medications. Every couple of years, I'd go back to whatever doctor I was seeing and see was there any new medication, what was the current therapy. And I cycled on and off all kinds of medications, but I always went back to prednisone and a medication called Flagyl, not really understanding that there was any other options. And
Are
then,
those
over
both
the years,
steroids? Prednisone's a steroid,
what?
right?
Yeah, prednisone steroid. Flagyl is an antibiotic,
Okay.
and it's actually very good
Oof.
against
Was
fungal
that making
infections.
things worse, or is that targeted to bad bacteria in the gut?
Yeah, so it's very antifungal. So I found that when I went on this medication, and it's part of my Crohn's protocol now that I recommend, is that if you have active infection, you need an antibiotic because the actual colon itself gets infected. So the
Hmm.
antibiotic is really useful. And I would try and stay on it for 2 to 4 weeks, and it would destroy a lot of the fungus. And that's again part of the syndrome. And because this is really a syndrome of the gastrointestinal microbiome. That's what this is. So
Hmm.
Crohn's disease is basically like almost all autoimmune diseases, an inflammatory chronic disease that basically humans evolved to have certain sensory inputs in their body. And when we don't get them, we break down. And everyone breaks down differently along the lines of their own genetic predisposition. So I'm
I want
Eastern
to give
European.
people a quick spoiler alert before you go too deep into that and say, look,
Sure.
if you're thinking this is another gut episode, which by the way, I would love doing because I can't have enough gut episodes on here, but he really
Sure.
has a different take. So you're going to want to stay tuned and hear this. When I was researching you, there were multiple times that I stopped to text people and I'm like, yo, I think this is going to be the solution to your problem. You have to like check this guy out. So, I want to get back to the story, but I just want to make sure that people know, because I brought a lot of gut people on. My wife has struggled profoundly with gut issues. I almost certainly now hearing your story, partly because of what your punchline is, which I will let you get to, but it is really interesting. Like, this is so complicated, and you're introducing yet another layer to this, which until you, my friend, I had not heard anybody talking about this. So just by way of sort of wrapping that up, so it's not just a big tease, what is that, the quick punchline, and then obviously we'll go into way detail on it.
Sure. So the punchline is, without an evolutionary vitamin D level, you will not be able to maintain a healthy gut microbiome. No matter how many probiotics you take, even if you get a fecal transplant, you're not going to be able to maintain that healthy gut microbiome. And this is because this was always an evolutionary advantage to us to change. The gut microbiome is an adaptable seasonal organ. And when your vitamin D level is low, your body thinks it's winter. And the different types of bacterial species will shift, and they will send different signals to the brain. So in wintertime, you should be getting a signal via the gut-brain axis to eat sugar and carbohydrates. This is an evolutionary advantage to our ancestors. Today, it's bad news.
Now, wouldn't that be the very thing that would be hard to get, though, in the winter? Why would you would think that the microbiome would switch to that when like fruit was plentiful? Why would that be? That feels like it should be a lead up to winter versus a winter thing.
In theory, it should be. So the issue is that you have to understand that, humans evolved like outdoors without clothing, hats, or sunscreen, and our natural state is to have a higher vitamin D level. So, some of the thought process is that towards the end of the season, as fruit is, ripe and you want to put on as much weight as you can, it just sort of depends on what you're looking at. I think that the issue is that over the evolutionary span of like ice ages and different climate conditions, that this microbiome was one of where you couldn't find game, and maybe you had to dig up tubers or so. Sending that signal when the gut microbiome shifts is, technically an evolutionary advantage if you're hungry all the time. I think it's really, I don't know that our ancestors would have had levels below 20 nanograms per milliliter. I just don't know that would ever have been the case.
So one thing that I found as I embarked on my own health journey, and again, like I was saying before, a lot of this kicked off for me because I legitimately got to the point where I was worried my wife was going to die. She had she couldn't hold on to nutrients. I mean, it was crazy. Her hair was falling out. Her nails were breaking. She was in pain all the time. We had tried everything. She had swallowed cameras, colonoscopy, endoscopy, FODMAP diet, like everything. It was crazy. And it was getting to the point where you start to feel helpless. And so we had been working with a bunch of different doctors. We finally found one doctor who was going to do an immunoglobulin transfusion. And I think it was the day before she was scheduled to have her first transfusion. And I was like, there's something wrong. Just stop. I'm going to embrace that I have to learn this now. And so I started just immersing myself in the microbiome, which I didn't, probably 6 months before that, I'd never even heard of the microbiome. And it was only because of what we were doing at Quest, which you actually ended up being involved in, which I didn't even realize until today. Right. So very, very interesting. So we start looking at the microbiome, and then 6 months later, my wife ends up just getting slaughtered by this. And so I was like, okay, I have to start going into this, researching, become my own expert. And as you begin to really peel back the layers and try to figure out what is causing the problem, you hit confusion after confusion. And it seems like you are one of a few voices talking about the gut, full stop. And then certainly you're the only person I have heard talk about the gut and vitamin D. Why is that?
Well, so the first thing you have to understand is that we have two basic groups. We have traditional medicine, allopathic doctors, and then we have the alternative medical world, which is highly variable. There's some guys who are really great and some people who want to make you put in ear candles. So there's a real variety. Okay.
Yeah.
So all this really goes back to what happened to our medical system, and it goes way back to another crazy Canadian dentist by the name of Weston Price. Now, Price's information was mind-blowing that at that time, I don't know
What
if it
time is
was
that? The 1920s?
1930s, yeah. So the current situation was the medical paradigm was eugenics, and everyone was interested in bloodlines, and it was very racist. And this is what Adolf Hitler was actually interested in, this whole eugenics movement. And at that time, this dentist, first of all, who not a real doctor, is saying, hey guys, they're saying, well, we think that the jaws are being destroyed and there's decay and gum disease because of a mixing of the races. And he says, hey, I think it's the environment. I think it's the diet and what these people are doing. And at that time, this guy must have just been, tossed aside. And this information is literally at the heart of this pandemic. The lack of understanding of what he said and his information, it's really been obfuscated continually over the last 80 years, and it's still being hidden. Because ultimately, when I say vitamin D is at the root cause of this, everyone thinks, oh, I'm good. I drink milk. I'm fine. I take a multivitamin. It's in there. In fact, the RDA is in there, so I should be fine. So the lack
Walk
of
me
understanding.
through. So back in the 1930s, Weston Price does what? Begins traveling around. He's looking at different peoples. What is he finding?
So his major concern was in his patients. This is in Minneapolis. He had a dental practice, and in those days, people had their teeth pulled and had full dentures. So he was seeing a total collapse.
Time out. People were intentionally just yanking their teeth out?
They had to, because there was profound decay and gum disease. So you're young enough. I'm old enough to remember a time where it was very normal. You hit your 40s and you had your teeth taken out and dentures put in. This is real.
What?
When I graduated from dental school, I was the only person who was doing full mouth extractions and immediate dentures because I was in a rural area. But this is the tail end of that whole generation, and people's mouths were falling apart. So this
I have a vague memory of something I came across, correct me if I'm wrong, that in World War II, oral health was considered like a national crisis because they were having trouble with soldiers.
Yes.
That was one of those sort of passing remarks that apparently stuck in my head, but that's insane. I had no idea that people were just yanking their teeth out.
Yeah, the whole, so basically with a breakdown of the whole jaw and the airway, he was seeing crowding, no room for all 32 teeth. And so he said, I want to go to places where people have great teeth and find out what are they doing. So he literally traveled around the world. And in those days, this is at a time before antibiotics had even been discovered. So he traveled around the globe. He went to 14 countries and 5 continents, and he went to visit all of the communities of Aboriginal people that were still just coming into contact with Western civilization. And interestingly enough, he photographed everything because he knew something very important was happening. And in his time, they were looking for twins to experiment on in Nazi Germany because they were believing in this eugenic stuff. So they were, torturing these twins. So he was looking for twins. And what he found were twins where one was following an ancestral diet and still living that lifestyle, and one where the other twin was eating a Western diet of refined carbohydrates and sugar and industrial seed oils. And so Weston Price had a very simple message. He said that this is what's going on. This is the root cause of a lack of room for all 32 teeth. This is the root cause of the decay and gum disease that he was seeing. And
do you know how he put that together? Like
pure observation.
When was vitamin D discovered?
So we're going to go back to the Industrial Revolution, okay? Because rickets, everyone's heard of rickets. It's a disease where your bones go soft. So this is going to be the Industrial Revolution in London, in Glasgow. That was where they found that children were having deformed bones. And we're talking about the Industrial Revolution, 1700s. So it was noticed that children who lived out in the country were much healthier, and they literally found vitamin D2. And they basically, which is plant vitamin D, but still works on humans. So this was known. So as we, got into those times, you need to think about tuberculosis. And it's a very interesting disease because tuberculosis is a bacterial infection of the skin or lungs. And this killed millions of people in those early 1900s. And the cure for tuberculosis was to go to a sanatorium where you would lie in a hospital bed in the sun. So they figured out that, sunlight alone would cure this bacterial disease. And at that time, in those 1920s, Schlitz beer was the sunshine beer. You can Google this to see an image of, in 1920, you'll see this can from 1920s, and it says Schlitz the sunshine beer. And
why? Because it had vitamin D in it?
They added vitamin D to it. So this is already, This is the third time
Who was
coming
it?
around.
Florence Nightingale that realized, I think during World War One, that if you put a soldier in the sun, their wounds healed more quickly. Man, that's so interesting. Like it feels like vitamin D would be one of those soft things where it's like, do I notice something? Do I not notice something? But for them to recognize those patterns, that's really, really interesting. Okay, so this is we're back in the Industrial Revolution. We begin to realize there's something happening because we're blotting out the sun, which is I think hard for us to imagine today. And you get a bit of this in say Beijing, where it's like you're really diminishing the sun's ability to reach people. But it's certainly hard for me to imagine because I look out. Look, I'm in LA. I look out. I see smog, but I can also lay out and get a tan. So I've always sort of thought of the Industrial Revolution as being a bit like that, but I'm getting the feeling if people were getting rickets that it was significantly worse.
Yeah.
So we begin to put it together. Did somebody actually draw blood and go, hey, there's this thing, vitamin D. So were we guessing at vitamin D the way that we sort of guess at particles?
Yes. Yes. We were guessing cod liver oil. So Weston Price noticed there was two chemical substances that every single Aboriginal community around the world had, and they would give this to their young people for fertility. And it was something that turned out to be vitamin D3 and vitamin K2. The K2 is something called activator X.
How are they isolating it?
Just by this is all by observation.
But I'm saying, like, you're a native tribe. How the hell are you isolating D3 and K2? Like that seems crazy. Was it in a plant? Is it in a fish? What are they doing?
Animal foods.
And they would, but they're doing some process to distill it.
So it was basically cod liver oil that they were that was a substance that.
How the fuck do humans figure this shit out? This is like, oh, by the way, if you cut a blowfish this way, you die, and if you cut it this way, it's delicious. It's like
trial and error.
What? How many? This is crazy. So, do we have any information on how they figured that out, or that's just sort of lost to the ages?
Well, so really, the coolest part about Weston Price is this is really the time pre-modern science, and so he's noticing this just by observation alone, no lab studies. The vitamin D hormone was not discovered until much later, until Michael Hollick, who is like the granddaddy of all vitamin D, who's still active in the scene. He isolated this and said, hey, this is a molecule. And that's when we finally knew what it was. We knew that sunlight was instrumental for health because, throughout all of history, this was known. The Greeks knew that sunlight was very useful for both mental and Hippocrates believed in heliotherapy, and they named it after the god of sun, Helios. And he used to prescribe heliotherapy for both physical and mental health. So we have to understand that when we were tribal people, and this is, a long time ago, the wisdom of the tribe was gained over many thousands of years through trial and error. And it's so interesting that they would give these two ceremonial foods for fertility, and they are literally vitamin D3 and vitamin K2. And just by observation, those two things, the D3, K2, is still at the core of what's plaguing the world right now, which I find kind of fascinating and sad and mind-blowing. We're all in lockdown because this information was subverted 80 years ago by the powers that be, the John Kellogg, the Rockefellers, the powers that be that produce cereal and that type of stuff.
Why would they give a shit?
Well, I don't know how well you've looked into some of that stuff, but they want.
I know a bit about Kellogg and his he didn't want guys masturbating or whatever.
That's great.
But other than that, I don't know a lot. So,
okay,
but what D3 just what gives you what you need to make the sex hormones, which then makes you feel randy? Like what?
Well,
what is the thinking?
So his issue was that he didn't want people eating meat. He and some other people are at the heart of the vegan movement because it made you horny. Made you.
Is there something real to that?
Sure, because nutritionally, meat's very healthy for you, and vegan, vegetarian diet technically is not. If I'm offending anyone, I'm sorry. But eating the whole foods that we evolved on is what makes us our best version of ourselves. When you start, this is back in the 1920s and 30s, that John Kellogg is packaging the cereal, and he's got his competition, and they're just packaging sugar, and that's what this is. So this industry, they were not interested in any natural therapies. The food industry and the pharmaceutical industry is the petrochemical industry. This is a message that they don't want to get out there. The question is, who really knows how powerful vitamin D is? And I can answer that. Big Pharma knows, they've tried apparently over 85 times to do a vitamin D analog. No one is interested in investigating these natural substances because they cannot be patented. Doesn't mean that we shouldn't be focused on them. And that's really what it is. Vitamin D got shoved to the side, as did heliotherapy, as did Tesla's information, as did everything. The petrochemical industry basically said, no, we don't want any of this stuff. This is all gone. And now we even
Really
have
fast. Why do you call big pharma petrochemicals?
well, if you look into the origin of who this is, right now we have Monsanto, which was a poison company purchased by Bayer, okay, which is a pharmaceutical company. So now we have the company that created poisons now has gone into food and the food chain and controlling the world's food. And they've created this particular poison that's in everything now. And the company Bayer
Called what?
is
What are you talking about?
glyphosate.
Glyphosate?
Glyphosate, yeah. I don't know. People maybe don't either want to know. I didn't care about glyphosate. I never wanted to be an environmental crusader.
But what do you mean
But
people don't want to know about glyphosate?
well, I think people hear that, oh, there's pesticides on your food. They don't really know just how profoundly this one thing is affecting not just Canada and America, but the world. This is a poison that was basically discovered. This is a toxic chemical. And this company, Monsanto, they changed into an agro company. And now they've been bought by Bayer. But the petrochemical industry is the pharmaceutical industry. They're one. If you start to go back, the medications are pharmaceutical, they're oil based. So these are all unnatural chemical medications that really go back to that time. I was surprised to be thinking in those terms. But, things have changed much over the years. And, what may have been a cohesive conspiracy back in the 1920s by a lot of those groups has now just, changed into who's making money.
All right, and so let's go. There's a lot of points in here, and I want to get to them because they're all really interesting, and it's part of what makes your message so internally coherent. Okay, so you've got in the beginning, you've got these guys that I'm going to paint it with an emotional brush, but I want you to stop me because I actually don't know virtually anything about this. So if I end up being unrealistically generous or whatever, let me know. I tend to be, I'm whatever the antithesis of conspiratorial is, that's me. I can look dead in the eye of a conspiracy and it just doesn't feel like a conspiracy to me. It just feels like people being stupid or greedy. But if this is like, there's something more sinister going on, let me know. So you've got this super religious guy who doesn't want guys masturbating or eating meat because it is somehow, I'm sure, against God. So he's got his reasons for wanting you to eat graham crackers. So he's going down that path, which I will grant him. It may have come from a beautiful place. Like I want to save everybody. And then you've got who was the other person that you said is coming into this and they wanted you to not know what vitamin D Rockefeller or somebody else you mentioned?
Well, so this all goes to it's strange because this is what's coming out right now with this conspiracy theory stuff is that there are apparently powerful families who made their money in oil who wanted just to control. And of course they wanted to make money because ultimately people do things for money. But the powers that be at that time, they wanted to control the narrative. And the narrative was one of racism.
Narrative around food or vitamin D?
Around health.
So you're saying this is a battle between epigenetics and genetics.
Yeah, that's correct.
Interesting. So you've got the psychopathy of people going down the eugenics route. They think that, at least as it intersects with teeth and diet, they think this is an issue of mixing genetics. And you've got our boy Weston Price going around the world saying, no, this is an epigenetic phenomenon. I don't know if we had that word back then or not. But he's saying, no, this is an interaction of genes and the environment. And modernity is moving us so far in one direction. Did he have his finger on the sun, or he just knew these two things that people are isolating have something to do with it?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I've never heard him discuss actual sun exposure, but his focus was so fascinating. It was vitamin D3, vitamin K2, those two substances, and he said
he was saying what? They fix your jaw, they fix your teeth, or did he know there was something way bigger going on? Because ultimately, we're going to bring this all back around to the gut and all kinds of crazy shit. I once heard you call sun exposure. You may have said vitamin D and K2 are the panacea, but you either said that or you said sun exposure is a panacea. And I like panaceas. That would be amazing. I want this to be that effective. But first, let's continue down that path real fast.
Sure. So this was his message. And so I want people to understand. So I'm a Canadian dentist. And just to give you a history, so when I found out who Weston Price was, I only found out 5 years ago. I've been a dentist now for 30 years. Weston Price is not taught in Canadian dental school or American dental school. When I found out who he was and I ordered his book online, and this is a book with photographs showing teeth and the jaws, I was alarmed that my country, Canada, and the dental school system would not have brought this gentleman forward. And he had some very simple rules. He said, these are the two substances that you should have in abundance, and they come from whole foods. They come from organ meats. And this other food comes from raw dairy. And this is basically cows that eat green grass. They produce a high level of vitamin K2. And he said, do not eat industrial seed oils, do not eat processed carbohydrates and sugar.
And he didn't have any studies. He's just saying, look, man, I traveled around the world. I'm telling you, if you want and I'm assuming he was focused on teeth.
Yep.
If you
He
want,
was focused on general health because it wasn't just
did he have other metrics? Like when he's taking the photos, are they primarily of jaws and teeth, or are they of all kinds of things, skin quality or whatever?
A little bit of both. And you'll see, anyone who wants to look it up, it's kind of mind blowing because I tell this to high level medical doctors and dentists and they're like, oh, whatever. I say, just read the first 30 pages. And he goes into the detail and he said, this is only by observation. There were no tests. But he's been trashed since then saying, well, he doesn't have proper research. This recognition of these conditions is really profound. And here we are more than 80 years later. What is every oil when you eat anything that's fried? These are industrial seed oils to this day. Every processed food that you are eating, unless you know where the food chain came from, has these toxic chemicals.
Now, is this a glyphosate problem or is there something inherent? Okay, yeah. So whoa. Did you just say deuterium?
Deuterium, yeah. So
now we're really getting into some complicated shit. So what is deuterium?
Okay.
Talk to me. There's something about water in all of this, if I'm not mistaken.
So I learned about deuterium at Quest Nutrition.
I was going to say, we had talked about this back at Quest. I honestly, it was so complicated. I don't remember it well.
So I'll bring it back just for a second to Weston Price. So Weston Price published all these pictures, which was very unusual. Medical texts did not have photographs. And he is quoted as saying, I have the use of photographs very liberally in my book. It said that a photograph is worth 1,000 words of text. And that's in the 1930s. So when I found this out, I was like, well, I want to finish what this guy started. This message is so simple. What he found changed my life, and he found the root cause of modern chronic illness. And I said, I want to bring.
Can you give me the root cause of modern illness in a single sentence?
Deuterium and glyphosate overdose. That's it. So those are the two. Those are our villains. And so the reason what I did is I created cartoon characters.
So even more than vitamin D, I actually thought I was setting you up to say something about vitamin D, but I want the truth, whatever that may be. Well, so deuterium and glyphosate.
Yeah. Deuterium glyphosate. So deuterium is what makes sugar, high fructose corn syrup, and even fruit bad for you. So to make this really simple, I created cartoon characters where you can see. So hydrogen is the simplest element. It has one electron and one proton. Hydrogen has three isotopes. One of them that's natural is deuterium. Deuterium is a natural substance found everywhere on this planet. It's found in water. It's found in food. It's even found in the air. This is a normal part of nature. When we process foods like sugar or grains are loaded with deuterium, and no animals on this planet or humans on this planet did not evolve to eat those foods. So that's why grain, corn, and soy, these foods are not healthy to us primarily because they are loaded with deuterium. They're not the natural foods that humans, naturally. Okay.
So it's not like we GMO'd them to have more deuterium or anything like that. It's not from acid rain. It's just naturally.
Over the years, we did GMO them.
To include more deuterium?
Yes.
I would assume by accident. It's just we were optimizing for something else and Absolutely. It happened to.
Don't you want the biggest, fastest growing, sweetest fruit? Okay, so that seems like it makes sense, but this is a mistake because we didn't know that this subatomic particle, I call deuterium father time because this is technically what ages us. The amount of deuterium that builds up in your body over time is technically what aging is. And so these are hard.
Because it's a free radical? Help me understand that.
No, it's not. So You've heard of carbon dating. So carbon
Yes.
has a molecular weight of 12. Carbon 14 is an isotope of carbon. Now, an isotope differs only by the number of neutrons. Okay, so there's only three subatomic particles: electrons, protons, and neutrons. So when you add extra neutrons, you create an isotope. Okay, and if you add enough neutrons, that becomes radioactive. So those neutrons are very powerful. Now, carbon 12 to carbon 14 is not much of a difference in molecular weight. Hydrogen, when you add one neutron, you double the weight. And that one thing becomes profound because we utilize hydrogen as fuel in our bodies because of its chemical structure. Hydrogen has a molecular weight of one. It's one electron, which is almost weightless, and one proton, which carries all the weight. So this hydrogen is tossed around everywhere in your body, in your mitochondria, through the electron transport chain. And we have this system where we produce energy in our mitochondria. And when we get too much deuterium coming into the mitochondria, it actually breaks the mitochondria's ability to produce energy. And that breakage is related to the production of cancer. So this deuterium was normal. So we do get a certain amount of deuterium that comes into our bodies, but through farming and through the advancement of what we thought was progress, we increase this food that's not natural, this finely chopped up sugar and flour that overwhelms our body. Then we're eating, all day long, snacking throughout the day. So we're constantly attacking our mitochondria with this deuterium. So prior to processed foods, you would not ever get a deuterium overload because the deuterium in the environment that you're in is tied to the sunlight, which starts to get complex, but that's why I have cartoon characters. So basically, prior to processed foods, you could not overdose on deuterium because it just wasn't in the environment. We needed to bring these new modern foods that started 12,000 years ago forward. Same reason why the Egyptians were unhealthy. They ate a lot of grain. So this extra neutron.
How do we know they were unhealthy? I've never heard that before.
Oh, really? Yeah. So you can do some research on it. A lot of the Egyptian kings had, all kinds of issues. They were eating basically grains. They were eating the foods that we came up with that were never our food. So where deuterium comes into play is that this gets into why grass-fed is healthy. Grass-fed, grass-finished, anything that eats grass is low in deuterium because grass itself is low in deuterium. And that's the food that humans evolved to eat. So we evolved to eat ruminants.
We evolved to eat things that ate grass.
Correct.
Got it.
So feeding cows and any livestock grain or soy is bad. It's bad news because those animals start to incorporate much more deuterium into their body. And so anything that has a high level of deuterium technically ages you. It's very hard on your body. So that extra neutron starts to weigh everything down. And we get into a little more sciencey discussions, but every part of your body has hydrogen attached. We use a lot of hydrogen. Hydrogen can be replaced by deuterium. It's natural. So water even comes in three varieties: H2O, HDO, and D2O. D2O is heavy water.
What?
You've heard of it? Yeah. This is. And I learned this at Quest Nutrition, just so you know.
That's so interesting. Okay, this is crazy. So that's deuterium.
Yeah.
We have, just for anybody that's sticking with us, man, rock through this. I think it's important, and we'll simplify it again by the end. I've heard you give very simple instructions before, and so I'll make sure to take us there. But so if our two villains are deuterium and glyphosate, let's just put a period on deuterium really fast. So in making things grow bigger, plumper, juicier, sugarier, yummier, we are unintentionally adding deuterium to it. So if you think about if you crossbreed wolves for temperament, you get a Cocker Spaniel. So to give people an idea, there's always these things that go along with it. It's actually really interesting. Like if you look at the way animals are bred and how you can predict certain features purely by breeding for temperament, certain other things will change. So I can totally get how we end up adding something, whether it's deuterium or anything, how we end up sort of unintentionally adding something because we're aiming at something else. Okay, so
and the industrial seed oils, they took these oils that were the waste product of farming, and they hydrogenate them, but they put in more deuterium. So that's why industrial.
Is that what hydrogenation is?
It's adding hydrogen, but they don't add pure hydrogen. They're adding a lot of deuterium. So being unaware of this is not known material, and this takes us back to Why is omega-6 oils bad for you? Okay, because they're higher in deuterium. So
Is it
these
bad or is it out of balance with omega-3 is problematic?
Well, so why are we getting all those omega-6s? They're coming from these processed seed oils. And what makes those? So the problem is that the more omega-6 we get, the more our cell membranes are made up of this unhealthy stuff that has all these extra
Can
deuterium.
you name what are some common seed oils? Because I think people are eating seed oils left, right, and center. They just don't know they're called seed
Yep.
oils.
Canola oil, corn oil, peanut oil, anything other than coconut oil, avocado oil, and olive oil. Those are the oils that are low in deuterium. And this gets back to why is it so grass-fed animals, why is a ketogenic diet healthy? And it goes back to deuterium and glyphosate. Why do people have a profound improvement of their health when they give up processed carbohydrates and go to a more high-fat diet? And that is at the core of what type of fat. It has to be a natural, grass-fed, organic fat, or else it's loaded in deuterium. And this is at the core. Again, every processed food that you buy is loaded with deuterium and glyphosate and these toxic seed oils. And this was a problem that started way back, in the 1920s. And again, observable to somebody who was really into, it sort of, when you think about what dentistry is, what we do is I've been in my location for 20 years. I see patients every 6 months lying down with this light shining in their mouth, and I have time to spend with them. I know their families. I'm now a primary healthcare physician to these people because when they go to their clinic, it's a different doctor. They wait in line, they get a prescription. I know these people. I see all their different generations. So I have different powers of observation based on what I do. Dentists have a very unusual job. I also have the experience of what I went through personally to be able to put these pieces together. Because when I started to get sick, and the sleep apnea came out of left field, but I was having other issues. I was having anxiety and depression, and I was grinding my teeth day and night. And bruxism is a vitamin D deficiency. Clenching and grinding
Where's
is
the collision? So do we have three villains? So we've got deuterium, we've got glyphosate, which we still have to get to, and then we have deficient vitamin D.
Vitamin D. Well, so when we add in glyphosate, and so deuterium, if you eat enough deuterium, your ability to make vitamin D in sunlight is decreased. You get something called deuterated cholesterol. So for people who don't know, vitamin D is made from cholesterol in our skin. And UVB radiation will transform a molecule of cholesterol, 7-dehydroxycholesterol. But if there's a lot of deuterium in your body,
it turns it into vitamin D.
Well,
just
correct.
To finish that sentence.
Yeah, correct. It turns into vitamin D. But if there's a lot of deuterium in your body for eating a lot of processed foods, the sunlight itself will have a harder time breaking that one chemical bond because of deuterium's extra neutron. So, and technically that's what aging is. So back in the old days before glyphosate, and here's where it comes together with vitamin D.
When you say that's what aging is, do you mean that's what aging of the skin is? Or that's what aging of every cell is?
Every cell. Every cell. Yeah, we're born at a certain parts per million in deuterium. And what happens is the deuterium will exchange for hydrogen. And this is a known reaction to physicists and chemists around the world. So when you Google deuterium, it's very, very common, but they're using this to gauge rates of reaction because
what about telomeres? How does this all add up? Because what I would have said prior to you making that statement is aging is where your cells have divided too many times, your telomeres have frayed like a shoelace, and the cells can no longer divide intelligently, and you basically all the things you think of as old age, the organs beginning to shut down, loss of muscle mass, skin sagging, on and on and on. That's because your cells or the telomeres have frayed and the cells are no longer intelligently dividing.
So telomeres, I don't believe they're a reliable marker because when your vitamin D level is low, you do not transcribe or produce the enzyme telomerase. Telomerase will repair your telomeres. And you can just do a simple Google search, type in PubMed telomeres and vitamin D, and you'll see several studies that show that when you have an evolutionary level of vitamin D, you will make more of this enzyme.
I didn't make you define that the first time you said it, but now I'm going to have to. What do you mean by an evolution level? What do you call it? Evolutionary level?
An evolutionary level, yeah. Yeah, the level that a human would have as a hunter-gatherer living outdoors.
And so which would be, what's the number?
In my opinion, it'd be on the low end 30, on the high end maybe, or the normal end 50. But at the end of the summer, it can go up to 80, 90, even 100. The highest level of
if I wanted to live forever,
yep,
what number would you tell me to strive for?
I'd be in the 60 to 80 range.
Don't 81. Stop it, Tom. No, 81's too much.
Lots of flexibility. Lots of flexibility.
So is there, I know if you supplement, I know that you can cause problems, you can overdose. You're never going to overdose by being in the sun. But I'm
Correct.
just curious, most things have a point of diminishing returns.
Yeah.
Is there a level that is too high?
So vitamin D, yeah. So yes, of course, there's a level that's too high. Different genetic populations will have different levels. It also depends on your entire vitamin D exposure, your life. If you have been vitamin D deficient, you got a lot of
Interesting.
catching up to. You'll use up more vitamin D. Vitamin D is a metabolic hormone. And you need to think of it this way, is that prior to modern electronics, in the old days, if you were more active, well, you would be active outside. You'd be either hunting or gathering or going outside. So the extra exercise and effort you put in using up more energy would be supplemented by getting more sunlight. Now, here we are staying out of the sun, and you are in your basement with your Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, and you're on your treadmill, and you're exercising, you're using up your vitamin D, but you're not replacing that energy. This is, humans evolved, we're animals, we're highly evolved animals, and taking in those signals is what changes everything. So we literally utilize sunlight for so much more than vitamin D. It literally charges the water in our bodies in the same way that plants take in the energy of the sun for photosynthesis.
All right.
And
So I
it's
need
just
you to commit. Is the third villain vitamin D deficiency, or does that not rank as high as deuterium and glyphosate?
So vitamin D is the thing. Vitamin D deficiency causes aging. So if you want to stay healthy, you want to obtain a vitamin D level. So back in the old days, before processed food, you would get older and older. And as deuterium would build up in your skin, your ability to make vitamin D would be reduced slowly over time. At a certain point, you would start to choke in your sleep, which is called sleep apnea. And then you would die a death of natural causes, which is dying in your sleep. Now we're seeing this happen. People are running out of vitamin D, not ever having enough, starting to have sleep apnea, choking in their sleep. So people are dying of strokes and heart attacks. People are dying of chronic inflammatory diseases because sleep apnea, which is a lack of vitamin D, is causing all of these issues. If you're not sleeping properly, you are not repairing and regenerating. Simple as that.
So the
The
lack of
other
vitamin
issue,
D, though, has multiple causes. You've got building up deuterium in your body, and you've got lack of sun.
yeah. So when vitamin D controls the microbiome, that gut microbiome is providing the chemicals to get you into normal sleep. It's providing all kinds of different chemicals. When the D level goes down and you can't ever get it back up again, you are going to die. That's it. And you can even, I have studies posted where, how this is linked to aging. So chronic inflammatory diseases, there's lots of different, there's what causes aging. There's the free radical theory, right? So over time, free radicals basically take their toll on your body and cause inflammation. Vitamin D runs the anti-inflammatory system, but this is the most profound thing. Vitamin D regulates your gut microbiome, which regulates sleep. If you're not sleeping, you're not repairing, and then you break down. And really, that's at the heart of the syndrome, if that makes sense. So the villains
No,
are
totally.
vitamin D. Now, how does vitamin D deficiency relate to glyphosate? Glyphosate destroys the enzymes in your liver and in your body that activate vitamin D. And this is information probably being spoken for one of the first
Activate.
times.
What do you mean? I thought it was happening when the sun hits the skin and it breaks off a electron or something.
Are you
I
right?
forget exactly what words you
So,
used.
yeah, so it breaks one chemical bond. Cholesterol is your body's starter molecule. Your body makes everything out of this building block. So when you take cholesterol and
So
you break,
should I stop taking a statin? No, I'm kidding.
yes,
I don't fuck
good.
with
Okay,
statins. Don't worry.
I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. Okay. So what happens is that the vitamin D itself, that's called cholecalciferol. That's vitamin D that you take. And when you take that, it has to go to your liver to
That's
be,
D3, you're saying?
yeah. So D3 itself is cholecalciferol. It has to be hydroxylated or it has to be activated. This happens primarily in your liver, although it can happen in other cells in your skin and your lungs.
It
The,
probably doesn't matter, but I'm curious enough to ask. When you
sure.
say activated, what at a cellular level, what are we talking about?
So when you like so if you basically it becomes an active molecule so that it can do work in your body. So
What's the difference
everyone
though
is
between an inactive molecule and an active molecule?
so the amount that your doctor measures is the 25 OHD. So that is the activated form of vitamin D. So you take vitamin D, it's not active, has to go into your liver to be activated by a specific set of enzymes called the cytochrome P450 enzymes, and they put one hydroxyl group onto a position, the 25 position. That's why they call it 25 hydroxy vitamin D. That's your body doing the first activation step. That's the storage form that circulates throughout your body. That's the level that your doctor measures. No one is measuring the actual vitamin D in your body. So in places where there's a lot of glyphosate, this stuff destroys these enzymes. And that's why I created cartoon characters of these enzymes, because when I say enzyme, you don't really have a good idea. But these are troops of enzymes. I drew them as robot submarines. They take two things and join them or pull them apart. To give you an idea, an enzyme is something, it's like the worker bee of your cell. So because glyphosate is such an aggressive poison, it actually kills the enzymes that activate vitamin D. So you could be outside, you could be taking a lot of vitamin D, but your body can't use it. And when you go to the doctor, your doctor goes, your vitamin D level is low. And if you're eating foods that are high in glyphosate, oatmeal, beans, things that people think are healthy but are loaded with glyphosate, these are the people who will show up at my office and they have very low levels of vitamin D because they may have the building block of it, but their body cannot activate it. And so that's why glyphosate and deuterium are such villains, because they both decrease your body's ability to take in the energy of the sun. And vitamin D literally is the power of sunlight in our bodies, and that's what keeps us young, literally. Why? Because vitamin D regulates autophagy. Vitamin D regulates the anti-inflammatory pathway. Vitamin D regulates the transcription of all kinds of different chemicals that keep us healthy and young. And vitamin D regulates sleep.
I think it's important to tell people, especially the ones that are watching right now, he's 85. So you can see how well, no, I'm just messing with you. But yeah, that is crazy. Thank you. That actually clicks a lot of things into place. So now, let's get into prescriptive behavior.
So just on that note, so when we see countries like Brazil or India, and they're having this high reaction to COVID, these people have suppressed vitamin D levels because they're literally eating this stuff. Brazil is loaded with glyphosate. The industry there is massive. So people who are literally should have high vitamin D levels, they don't have those because this chemical is destroying their body's ability to activate it. And what's even worse is there's a second step where the vitamin D gets activated to the active form, the 125 point. And that form is the active point that actually goes to your DNA to create different enzymes. So an inability to do that second activation is also caused by glyphosate. So these two things, this deuterium and glyphosate, this is literally breaking down us, these two villains. On their own, they're dangerous separately, but they combine because glyphosate will literally tear open the cell membranes and deuterium will be able to actually damage more. So that's sort of, yeah.
So earlier you said that from a healthy diet perspective, we're better off eating meats. You didn't say exclusively, but versus a vegan diet. Yep. What if glyphosate were out of the picture? Could we get everything that we needed from a vegan diet if it was, organic and, raised or grown in the perfect way? You're shaking your head. So what's missing from a vegan diet?
Nutrient density. So if you're going to be on a vegan diet and you're not going to have any processed foods, to be a healthy vegan, it's doable, but you have to supplement and supplement and supplement with these processed foods. Anytime you chop up a food, you're giving your body something it was never designed to have. We're used to chewing food, and we never have these processed little chopped up bits. Think about your colon and the absorption. This is a completely different level of absorption when we have these unnatural foods. Even when you eat fruit, there's fiber in there. Now you're drinking juice. It's completely toxic. It has deuterium and glyphosate, and it's completely unnatural. You don't get the slow absorption of the sugar from the fiber of the fruit. So I believe that you can probably survive as a vegan. I think it's too hard to know, no matter how healthy you eat, to be able to get rid of that glyphosate that no one's testing for. And that's why I think a lot of vegans get very sick, is because they've been basically dosing themselves with this toxin at the same time as they are not having these nutrient-dense, high-fat, high-protein foods that we evolved to eat. I can hear vegans in the comments screaming right now, this asshole, here's another guy. You're destroying the planet. Fuck you very much. And I'm super healthy. I switched to being vegan from eating meat a year ago. I've never felt better in my life. What do you say to that? I've heard people say like, hey, a lot of people get some good benefit in the beginning, but over time it becomes problematic or something else. What's your take on that? Well, my take, and this is where it comes down to that extra neutron. If you eat a vegan diet, it's higher in deuterium, period. Okay. All of those foods, they have a higher level of deuterium.
Just plants in general have a higher level of deuterium?
Starches. They're starches. So how are you going to get the nutrition into your body? Our bodies were designed to eat meat. Now, you don't have to, you can eat seafood, you don't have to eat red meat and organs and that, but the idea that vegan it's not a match for our body. You can do it, but you'd have to be supplementing everything. If you're
And
eating,
what is it? What do you see in our body that makes you say that it's not a match? Because people will show images of like a wolf's teeth and be like, that's a carnivore. We don't have teeth like that, Mr. Dentist. Nobody should know better than you. Look at us. We were meant to just grind up some grass.
Nope. Here's what we have. We have our brain. When we figured out we could trick an animal to running off a cliff and then go and get it, that's the origins of hunting. You've probably heard that we used to go and after the carcasses were left, we'd go and snap the bones open and we would get the marrow. And that's what was the first profound change to get us away from being herbivores. So we never needed those teeth. We have our brains. Our brains are much sharper than any animal's teeth because we can use thought processes and reason.
That's good. I like that.
Yeah. And to any vegetarian or vegan who doesn't like this is what I say. I'm 53 years old and I was sick for most of my life. I watched my parents and what they did. I watched what they ate. I watched the medications they took and I saw how they died. And you can fool yourself and you can be doing this and thinking it's great and you can even feel good, but you can't fool Mother Nature or your body. If you take in...
They both died of pancreatic cancer?
Correct.
So what is the connection between cancer and our three villains? So
deuterium and glyphosate destroy the mitochondria. And that's why I have Marty mitochondria. This is where everything, people can think of your body as a computer, okay? So you have your brain is the CPU, and the different parts of your brain are the software programs, and your brain will send down signals through your nerves, all right? It doesn't matter how healthy your body is. If that signal coming out of your brain isn't strong enough, your body's going to work properly. Imagine that you build this beautiful house with all this Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and all the great stereo surround system, and you plug it into the power grid, and the power that's coming in is weak and wobbly, and none of your appliances work right. So you keep on calling out the repairman to fix these things, but ultimately they're not working because the amount of power coming in isn't what these things were designed to have. So all of life is centered around the production of energy second by second. Your mitochondria is the most important part of your body. This is literally your metabolism. This controls everything, including aging. Mitochondria controls apoptosis, programmed cell death. Your mitochondria, because it's the power source. And so what happens is that when these mitochondria start to produce less energy, everything in your body starts to suffer. And what we're looking at in allopathic medicine is doctors looking at all these breaking down body parts. They're not understanding the core of how we actually work. They need to understand that, number one, your mitochondria is the most important thing. Number two, your gut microbiome is regulating and interacting with your brain and all the rest of your body. Not understanding this is a profound problem with our current medical paradigm. And the idea that vitamin D deficiency is really at the core of this is just going to go over people's heads because it doesn't seem like it could be important. And the reason that I'm such a big proponent of this vitamin D is that people don't understand that I lived as a sick person my whole life. And when I raised my vitamin D level from a level below 20 to 80, every single thing that was wrong with me melted away. And people say, well, you're crazy. You think vitamin D deficiency causes everything. And no, not everything, but an awful lot. Because of what it controls. It controls the gut microbiome and it controls your sleep. How does it control the gut microbiome? Same way it's supposed to control all the barriers of your body. You produce antimicrobial proteins, and this is your body's main defense against any pathogen, whether it's COVID-19 or a bacterial lung infection. That's why people who went to lie in the sun who had tuberculosis got better. They raised their vitamin D level, their gut microbiome came back, and their body was able to produce all of these chemicals, both in the barrier cells and through the gut microbiome. Your gut microbiome is making all of these different chemicals. 90% of your serotonin is made in your gut microbiome. So this is something that we relied on forever. And not understanding that our microbiome is being destroyed. It's being destroyed by glyphosate is an antibiotic. It kills the diversity of the gut microbiome. It kills the diversity of your lung microbiome, your skin, everything, you name it. It's very toxic chemical.
Now, I have a feeling that in there was the answer that now I'm going to ask for, but I want to recontextualize it because you started to say something and I interrupted you. You said when vegans come to me and they have a problem with what I'm saying, I tell them this, I watched how my parents died, and then
Sure.
I went in on the parents, and then we sort of decontextualize it from the vegan thing. So I just want to bring it back.
The decisions that you make every day of your life, the choices that you make, all start to add up over time. If you're 24 and you're a vegan and you're happy and healthy, that's great. But I've been a clinician for 30 years. And I've only ever been in two real different locations. I was 10 years in Canada and then 20 years in this location. I see people age. I have patients who get sick, get cancer, and die. So I see this process of aging. So just because you're doing something when you're 24, 25 that feels right, you are literally can be damaging your body so that as you get older, the systems that we have break down. So like that's like I say, you can't fool Mother Nature. You can't fool no matter what you do, that extra neutron, if you're taking in too much deuterium, it's destroying your body. It's getting incorporated into your enzymes. So enzymes are long strings of protein that have hydrogen. When more deuterium is replacing hydrogen, those enzymes start to warp because of the extra weight. That deuterium is twice as heavy as hydrogen, and it resonates heavy and slow, and it starts to warp your DNA and break down your actual DNA. Your DNA is surrounded by sugar. That sugar starts to get deuterated. So the actual sugar, the hydrogen gets replaced with deuterium and it starts to bend and warp your DNA. That's why this is aging. And so that's why when people are overloading with sugar and high fructose corn syrup, they're literally prematurely aging themselves. So by following this, this may seem good now, but over many years, this lifestyle, it's not sustainable. If you were really great at substituting all kinds of stuff, you could probably stay relatively healthy. But the question is, what makes you think that farming isn't more destructive for this planet than having regenerative, small, organic farms where ruminants and different types of crops are moved around? The answer is, well, we had megafauna way up north. There was all kinds of massive animals that this planet can support much more meat production than it can farming. Farming is so destructive. All you're doing is you're taking away from that soil year after year. How is that ever going to produce proper, healthy, nutrient-dense food? It isn't, because after a certain number of years, you got to put on nitrogen fertilizer. That's not natural. That's not healthy. And the real issue with farming is that Mother Nature doesn't work in isolation. Monocrops and planting one crop is wrong because we need the collaboration of the microbes in the soil, just like your gut microbiome is controlling your health. The soil's microbiome is controlling what grows from it. And when you use glyphosate or do monocrops, you're killing the soil. You're not replacing it. When you have an animal eating green grass, which is what it was designed to eat, it's eating it, it's walking around trampling the grass, its waste products are being incorporated into the soil, increasing the carbon. Soil is a huge carbon sink. If everyone was doing regenerative farming, who knows what the greenhouse gases would be, but there is no, the type of stories where, cow farts that is causing methane, this is all nonsense. Farming is unnatural. 12,000 years ago, we stayed put and became farmers. And we thought that was a good idea. It wasn't. It was a mistake because we didn't know. We didn't have an electron microscope. We didn't know what deuterium was. It's as simple as that. Farming was a big mistake for our health, and it still is. And if you want to be healthy and live a long, healthy life, you have to follow Mother Nature's rules. We evolved from the dirt of this planet under her conditions, through the energy of the sun, in this connected world where there's fungus and molds and all these different things that are natural. We're supposed to be in that environment. That's what keeps us healthy. This sanitizing your hands and stuff, this is not good. This is not going to end well. It's not who we are.
Dude, amazing. I have to press you on K2. I get all of the sun in the world. I live in Los Angeles. During COVID, I've never been more tan in my life. I was having a meeting earlier with my wife, by the way, who happens to be my business partner, but in my underwear. And that's amazing. But you're freaking me out that there's a balance issue with K2 and I don't know shit about it. I eat primarily meat. So I do have some vegetables, but I'm not hardcore. I do have some fruit, but I'm not hardcore. 80% of my calories probably come from grass-fed beef. Am I getting K2 somewhere?
Are you eating fermented food products?
Zero.
Okay, that's where you get K2 from. All right.
Okay, so basically I'm on death's door
No,
and
not at all.
I
So
need to do what here?
So this goes back to the same thing. So what is osteoporosis? Why is it that when we get older, our bones get brittle? It's because this information is not known. Vitamin K2 is not known. And where this comes down to is doctors are still doing this in my neighborhood. I'm on the west side of Los Angeles. They give elderly women calcium and vitamin D, thinking, well, vitamin D makes you absorb calcium, so that should do it. It's dangerous. You don't want to take calcium with vitamin D. You get a lot of calcium if you're eating a balanced diet, dairy or green leafy vegetables. But vitamin K2 manages the calcium. So vitamin D brings the calcium into your body. Now it gets into your arteries, into your skin, and starts to build up. Why? Because K2 grabs that calcium and puts it into the matrix of bone. So how we evolved, especially like summer and winter, in the summer when the grass is green, you get a lot of K2. The sun is high, you have a lot of vitamin D, and you bring in all this calcium, gets put into your bones, so your bone density goes way up. In the winter, the grass is brown, very little K2 because K2 comes from green growing grass, and no sun, no vitamin D. So your body will literally go into your bones and pull that calcium out. I call it your personal bone bank, a
So
personal
why am I
calcium
not
bank.
getting K2 from grass-fed beef?
So you probably are getting some.
Should I
The
be eating
question is,
kale?
nope,
So
nope.
fermented
So
stuff
there's,
freaks me out. I'd rather
yeah.
avoid it. But if I need to eat it, then so be it.
So
But
there's
is there
supplements. So I have,
supplements make me tense. I try to avoid supplements wherever possible. I just have a hypothesis that isolating things does not give you the same thing as the real deal.
have you heard of natto?
No, never.
Okay. So natto is a Japanese bean curd that's fermented.
Didn't you just
It
say beans are
looks,
bad?
yes, I did.
Does
But
the
so
fermenting get rid of the bad part?
that's a great question. So the question is, where do you get your natto from, and is there glyphosate in the natto? Natto, but natto has tons of K2. It's very popular in Japan as a breakfast food. And so vitamin K2, if you get it through natto, is fine. But again, I only supplement what I need to. I know how important vitamin K2 is. So I eat a lot of cheeses, hard cheeses. You can drink raw milk or eat a lot of raw dairy. That has K2. I want to make sure, because I know how profound K2 is. K2 is a cofactor in 17 known enzymes. So without vitamin K2, these enzymes are just sitting there not doing anything. So the things that I want to supplement, I have my bare minimum that I want to supplement. I want to supplement vitamin D in the winter. I want to supplement vitamin K2 every day. And I want to supplement magnesium because magnesium is being taken out of our food chain by glyphosate.
So how do
Glyphosate
I
is,
get magnesium and K2 if I were going to supplement,
yep,
especially those two things?
yes.
Is there a brand that you recommend, a
Yeah, mine,
dosage?
mine, of course.
Do
I have my
you
own brand.
have? That was not a setup. I had no idea.
No, yeah,
Um,
so I started talking about this 5 years ago with my patients, and at first I thought I was crazy, and then I'd say, "Are you taking your vitamin D?" When you really look into vitamin D and you see that you're not going to find people with an evolutionary level of vitamin D of 40, 50, or higher, and cancer, you don't see those things. To me, it became obvious this is really important. But people are like, oh, I drink milk, I'm good, I take a multivitamin. But so I created my own vitamin line and I branded it with my cartoon images to make this understandable and relatable. Because this is literally at the core of our health, how we age, how children's jaws grow and develop, and this current pandemic. So making these vitamins memorable and giving someone an idea and putting this together easily is what I wanted to do. So I just created a little vitamin line, and I was again supposed to be making a candy bar with Quest Nutrition that had vitamin D3, vitamin K2, magnesium, and MCT oil, and resistant starch. So it was basically prebiotic. It was kind of everything you needed. Because if you want your child to be intermittently fasting, you can't do that. Children are sugar burners because they're eating goldfish crackers and all the sugar stuff. So I wanted to create a product that was a chocolate cookie that was very low in deuterium, made with a lot of coconut, because coconut is very low in deuterium. That's why coconut oil is so healthy. That had everything all in one. Because it's too hard for people to, it's too much to remember. They can remember one thing. So that's why I created this product, because this is the easiest thing in the world. Eat this chocolate candy. I wanted to simplify this because no one wants a chemistry set of vitamins. It's irritating, annoying. I wanted to make this easier. You have to understand that I suffered from a vitamin D3 and K2 deficiency at every stage of my life. This ruined my growth. It ruined my health. It ruined my craniofacial development. It ruined my sleep. It ruined everything. And so I don't think anyone is taking this seriously enough. The fact that people aren't actively monitoring their vitamin D level is bizarre. The idea that when you go to your doctor, the first thing they don't say is, hey, let's get a vitamin D level on you. How much are you supplementing? The fact that that's not the conversation is mind blowing. For the last 80 years, this has been the most critical information that anyone could ever do. Why? It regulates aging, it regulates the gut microbiome, and it regulates sleep. That's pretty powerful. So to me, this is the most important thing. People who have different chemical issues where their body's out of whack, raising the vitamin D level normalizes the majority of those. Probably 80% of the general public will regain complete health. 20% will need specialized care, looking more into different diets and more different supplements. But this is the easiest fix. This is what's bankrupting the Western world. This is what's bankrupting Canada's socialized system medicine. This is what's destroying our future here, is a lack of understanding that most people's sleep is destroyed by this one thing. The gut microbiome is destroyed by this one thing, and then add in that glyphosate, and everyone is getting these modern chronic diseases, which are literally nothing other than a vitamin D3, vitamin K2, now magnesium deficiency, and it's caused by glyphosate is taking the minerals out of the soil, and it's killing the microbiome soil. So the gut microbiome and the soil microbiome, they produce these different vitamins that go into the actual vegetables that you're growing. So when you grow something in soil that has a lot of microbes, they are contributing to the health and the nutritional component of any vegetables that you grow. So this is such a core understanding. When as a dentist, I'm seeing these kids with little tiny airways and retruded jaws and very narrow palates. I discussed something called long face syndrome. This is improper craniofacial growth and development caused by mouth breathing because children can't breathe through their nose. And, I have a lot of information online about that. But this one thing is really profound because if children don't sleep properly, they don't grow. If anyone's listening to this and you have a child that grinds their teeth, snores, or is having issues like that, ADD issues, they're not sleeping correctly. And if you don't go into the deep stages of sleep, you don't release growth hormone. So for me, I did not go through puberty till I was 17.
Whoa.
I was stunned. Yeah, I was stunted in growth. When you're 14, you're 14. I was taking prednisone at age 14, but I was choking in my sleep. Prednisone, the primary medication for autoimmune disease, lowers your vitamin D level. It sequesters vitamin D. So we're making the syndrome worse. So there I was vitamin D deficient, taking this medication that was making everything worse, lowering my own vitamin D level. So it's the sleep cycle. That's when you repair. It's the sleep cycle. That's when you grow. Children grow in sleep. So this one thing, this D3K2, basically omission from all of modern medicine, this is scandalous. This is at the core of almost every modern chronic inflammatory disease. Because when you go to your doctor, here's what happens. You walk in, and if you're obese and you have some health issues, your doctor says, this is your fault. You're a glutton. You don't care about yourself. You need to eat better. You need to exercise more. But if you're thin and you have a health issue, it's genetic. So it's still always your fault. And that's what my issue was. I had a genetic syndrome, and it wasn't genetic. It was environmental with a genetic component. Because when you basically decrease the overall health of an animal, everyone's going to break down along the lines of their own genetic predisposition. Eastern European Jews get chronic inflammatory bowel disease. That's part of our genetic breakdown. Could be one or two different proteins that are not getting made just because, you don't have a broad range. And this is the funny part too, is that Weston Price is saying, hey guys, this is the environment. These guys are saying, no, keep the bloodlines pure. We know this, that the most different, diverse connection of mother and father, the more different that you are genetically, the healthier that you are. When you are an inbred population, you have too many of the same genes and chromosomes. When you have a completely, mixed race marriage, the child has a much greater genetic variability, and that will give you greater health. That's why these small populations have a lot of health issues. Eastern European Jews have a lot of health issues that are related to that small gene pool, which is fascinating. Now, the other thing related to that is we rely on our gut microbiome. They produce 90%, their DNA outnumbers ours 100 to 1. So you have all these great genes that we use, but the gut microbiome's DNA outnumbers ours 100 to 1. So what that means is that we're relying on the chemicals that they make much more profoundly than we rely on what we are making from our own actual cells. And that's why the microbiome is the most important thing And it's crazy because this deuterium and glyphosate, this is killing our microbiome. It's killing the bees and the butterflies' gut microbiome. That's why the bees are dying out from glyphosate. But it's also killing the soil's microbiome. And this is literally killing the diversity of Mother Nature. This is killing the all the different species on this planet.
Oof.
And this
All
is
right.
through
So
yeah.
give people in like a quick 30, 60 seconds. I love like, what can people do? A quick primer on diet,
Yeah,
supplementation, sun exposure, if that's part of it. What does
sure.
that ideal life look like?
Sure. So I like to consider that humans have become disconnected from our natural habitat and the elements of life, air, earth, fire, and water. Okay. So fire is the radiation of the sun. Humans are solar powered animals and we take a charge off the sun. You need to get sunlight on a regular basis without sunglasses because sunlight in your eyes and even around the skin around your eyes tells your brain all kinds of signals. I only wear sunglasses inside a car. Okay. So you want to manage your radiation. I call it radiation rules. I wear blue blockers at night because blue light destroys melatonin, and I will not wear any sunglasses during the day. Okay, so that's fire. Earth is what you
And
eat, and
no sunscreen, I assume.
no sunscreen. That's a long discussion, but no, I can't advise it. So we'll talk about there are natural sunscreen that no one's making because you can't patent them, and no one's willing to do the research. And I have connection to the scientists who can make these products. Taking a vitamin D molecule and irradiating it and putting that on your skin, that protects you. There's something called lumestrol, which is a natural sunscreen. It's what happens to vitamin D when it gets irradiated. It turns into lumestrol. So these are products that, I've been trying to get my information out for 5 years. People, it's hard to get out there. So we go to Earth, it's what you eat and how you eat it. Number one, they cannot spray glyphosate on grass. Anything that eats grass is low in glyphosate. Anything that isn't coming from a processed food is healthy. So nose to tail, organ meats, and then intermittent fasting, narrow your eating window. Do not eat throughout the day. You're stressing your mitochondria, constantly feeding it deuterium. It never gets a chance to heal itself. And then we go to water. Water's easy, but the sunlight charges your body. So being in the sun helps keep you healthy in the same way that plants grow from photosynthesis. And the last is air, breathing, and sleep. The whole insomnia, sleep apnea syndrome is a lack of oxygen due to the airway collapsing. If you don't get enough oxygen, your brain's going to set an alarm, hey, wake up. When given the choice between sleep and breathing, your body is going to choose breathing every time. So it's going to destroy your sleep. Yeah. It's going to destroy your sleep. If your sleep is destroyed, you can't heal. So those are basically, I call it like, reconnecting to Mother Nature. We are hunter-gatherers. Our biology is that of a hunter-gatherer, but we're living in this modern world. We need to really emulate the behavior of our ancestors and replace those missing elements of life actively. So I say, if you haven't checked your sleep by having a sleep study, you're over the age of 50, you're making a mistake. Sleep is the most important thing you can do, and it's really not on people's radar. Everyone wants to have a comfortable bed, and apparently if you raise your bed, you stop snoring. Snoring is a vitamin D deficiency, and children who snore will stop within 2 to 3 days of dosing the right amount of vitamin D, that quickly.
Yeah, I heard you say once that this is a neurological problem,
Yeah.
and the way that you alleviate that is with vitamin D. And I thought, whoa, that's amazing. And the way you explained all the different ways that we can be vitamin D deficient, I had spent a lot of time researching you, and I came into this thinking that, it's largely a case of sun exposure, but hearing all the ways that we can sort of fuck up our body's ability to take in the sun that we're actually being exposed to is amazing.
Well, that's at the core of epigenetics because genetics is the genes you inherited. Epigenetics is how you activate those genes. And what is in control of that? The environment. The environment is the diet that you eat, the radiation you're exposed to, and the activities that you do. It's as simple as that. Humans are sensors for the environment because we evolved here. And our bodies are so highly adaptive that we change on an hourly basis depending on what we put into our systems or the light that we're exposed to. We need to pay much closer attention to what these signals coming into us are. And we'll go back to the vegan vegetarian thing. They're taking in information that ultimately is being funded by companies like Monsanto. The vegan movement is highly funded by them because they benefit. That's really the truth. And so this goes back to the idea that when these sensory inputs are coming in, you can't fool your body. So if you're getting this false information on what's healthy, you can really damage yourself. And that information, it used to be that as a hunter-gatherer going through the forest, if you didn't pay attention to a twig snapping or seeing a shadow move, you could be eaten by a predator. Nothing has changed in the modern world. If you're listening to the wrong sources of information and doing the wrong things, you're going to die. It's just going to be a long, slow death from chronic inflammatory disease. And that's really it. This is epigenetics really far advanced. And the hard part for me is this is so simple. There's such simple things that people can do and incorporate into their life that can have a massive effect.
Mic drop. Dr. Gould, thank you, man. This was awesome. I would love to have you back at some point. There are many, many things that we didn't even begin to touch on. This was awesome, dude. Thank you so much. Hopefully we can help get that message out. And yeah, man, I really, really appreciate it. Guys, where can they find you, by the way?
So as a dentist, I practice Manhattan Beach. It's Modern American Dentistry. My Instagram is modern_hunter_gatherers. My website, modernhuntergatherers.com, or my name, Joel Gould. And in this world, it's hard, I try to get followers because people don't necessarily want to